Lost in the vast white, two strangers are forced to face the worst. Not only the cold, but the desire that grows in the warmth of survival. He, a hardened soldier, and she, a solitary scientist. In the end, the Arctic will know the truth. They were not as different as they thought. The accident happened in the Arctic, where life seems to freeze at its core. The research station, isolated in the middle of the vast whiteness, was struck by an unexpected explosion. Maybe the bad weather contributed, or perhaps it was human error, a gas leak, or an electrical shock from some military equipment. The fact is, in the deafening crash, the fire spread quickly, and the station became a death trap. Researchers and soldiers lost their lives, their screams carried away by the freezing wind. When the smoke and snow finally calmed down, 2 survivors remained in the field of ruins. She, an introverted scientist with a sharp mind but a fragile body in the face of adversity. He, a soldier, hardened by life, always calculating, always ready to lead, but never imagining he would have to lead his own survival. He woke first, pain throbbing in his chest, and his vision blurred. The smoke was still thick, but the sounds around them were muffled by the cold wind. She was beside him, motionless, but breathing. He pulled her out from the debris, and in an instant they were out in the open field, heading into nothingness with the station disappearing behind them. The research station was no more. Rescue was far off. The Arctic, with its frozen vastness, had taken everything. They were alone. The radio wasn't working. The GPS was out of service. With the biting wind and the snow intensifying, they were alone, with nothing but their bodies and their survival skills. He took the lead, but he had no choice. She didn't question it, because there was no other option. The scientists knew it was not the time to fight for leadership, but for survival. Fear was everywhere, but they both knew one thing was certain. Together, they had a chance. The days were long, the snow falling relentlessly, and the extreme temperatures tested them with each step. He taught her to conserve energy, to filter water from the snow, to make fire using improvised materials. She, in turn, used her intelligence to find solutions. To keep them as safe as possible using the remnants of the destroyed station. But there was something in his gaze, something she couldn't define. A silent need to be the hero, to protect, but also to depend. It wasn't used to depending on anyone, and that began to change. The nights were even harder. Cold pierced their bones, and they huddled together in an improvised shelter, trying to keep warm. The vulnerability they felt started to bond something between them, but neither she nor he were willing to admit it. After several days with no response, help seemed too far away. The station's fire was out, and they were struggling to maintain warmth. That night, when the winds howled stronger, the ice around the research station seemed to increase. They were exhausted. Lying in the shelter, she began to feel ill. The fever spiked, and her lips became cracked, powerless. She looked at him, but he seemed more focused on the fire than on her. Then he moved closer, without saying a word, and held her cold hands. In that moment, he realized how much more vulnerable she was than he had imagined. She, who seemed so strong, was on the verge of giving in. He took a piece of cloth, dipped it in the cold water of the melted snow, and placed it on her forehead. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, she saw him not just as a soldier, but as a man. His touch was gentle, almost healing, and she allowed herself to rest. He, unknowingly, had crossed the line between them, and the line between fear and need became thin. She looked at him and for a moment didn't see the distant soldier anymore. She saw the concerned man who now shared her weakness. That cold night, the cutting wind, nearly extinguished the fire. The cold became unbearable. But they didn't move away from each other. They moved closer, feeling the warmth still emanating from her body. She, who had distanced herself emotionally before, now found herself instinctively close to him. She looked at him, the weak light from the fire reflecting on his face, and felt a strange sense of comfort, of security. It was as if, in that small space between the cold world and the warmth of the fire, she was allowing herself something she had avoided until then. He was there, without haste, without words, just with his silent presence. When she moved closer, their bodies touched, first lightly, like a test. The sensation was warm, warmer than the fire in front of them. He held her gaze, and without saying a word, she let the closeness speak for them. The touch, which once seemed impersonal, was now charged with silent tension, almost palpable. The warmth between them grew, not from physical proximity, but from the trust that had been subtly built over those days together. The following days passed in a rhythm of survival and discovery. They continued fighting the cold, searching for food, and protecting their improvised shelter. The mountain, which once seemed an impassable place, now appeared to be a silent testament to their resilience. With each new challenge, they grew closer. The trust between them grew with each night spent shielding themselves from the wind, with each task shared, with each supportive look when one of them faltered. There were no more discussions about leadership, about who knew more or had more experience. They no longer needed that. He trusted her, and she trusted him. Survival had created between them something neither of them expected. They were not just surviving, they were supporting each other, taking care of each other, coming together in a way that seemed deeper than anything they had experienced before. On the fourth morning, the fog that had enveloped the mountain began to dissipate. They could see the vastness of the landscape around them. The world outside seemed immense, inhospitable, but with a sense of freedom they hadn't felt before. The sky, still cold and overcast, seemed to reflect the change that had occurred between them. It was then, during a break to rest, that he looked at her and without words took her hand. It was a simple gesture, but profound, as if he was asking for more than just survival. He was asking to continue with her. She squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of the connection that had united them in that frozen vastness. They were no longer two strangers bound by an accident. They were partners, companions in battle, and what had started as necessity had turned into something more. She felt it in his touch, in the way he looked at her, with something more than the simple desire to survive. He was looking at her with the trust that only shared experience could create. And in that moment, the mountain seemed to watch, as if it already knew the truth they hadn't fully recognized yet. Neither the ice, nor the cold, nor the isolation could break what they had built together.
After days of waiting and continuous efforts, the wind brought something different. A distant sound, metallic and irregular, blending with the mountain's howl. They exchanged cautious glances, but their racing hearts betrayed the hope they hadn't dared to feel. It was a rescue team that had located the station using emergency signals, improvised smoke, mirror reflections, and tracks in the hardened ice. Carefully, the two descended the rugged terrain side by side, hands entwined. Every step was firm, but carried relief and disbelief. The cold still cut, the wind still blew, but there was something warmer than any shelter's flame. The bond they had built. When they finally reached the team, the rescuers saw them only as two survivors, exhausted, wounded, but alive. But the mountain knew the truth. It knew of the shared fear, the warmth exchanged, the silent love that had been born between the biting winds and the snow. Nothing needed to be said. The look they exchanged said it all. They had endured the worst and came out stronger together. As they were taken out of the station, the frozen vastness became just a backdrop. Survival had created something no rescue could erase: trust, care, and love. And no matter what uncertainties the future days would bring, they knew this experience had changed them forever. Some truths belong to nature, and the mountain never forgets.